good, everybody? Ace from Ace Corner Talk. Peace. Hope all is well. Coming to you tonight just to drop some jewels on you. Hopefully everybody enjoyed their day. Hopefully everybody enjoyed their eclipse experience. Feeling good tonight, in a good mood. Got the chat open. Aces in the hole. I just want to say this before I start. Appreciate all those who showed Queen C some love, man. Your boy was down and out, so I couldn't be inactive, and she did her thing, and she wanted to start something new for her own self. And of course, Ace's Corner Talk is for everybody. You know what I mean? Especially my queen. So I appreciate everybody who showed us some love. I heard, heard a few things that popped off, but it was able to be handled by the aces in the hole. So I appreciate it. I gave my wrenches out wisely to those who was going to utilize it to put some things into perspective, and I appreciate that. I want to say thank you to my wife for being a support. Thank you to my wife for being who she is and, holding down the fort and doing what she chooses to do with no boundaries. Ace doesn't put any boundaries on anyone. My wife is free to do as she please because we are a unit. And whatever she do, I support. And whatever I do, she support. And that's what makes us one. So I appreciate everybody. Thank you to all my subscribers. Thank you to all of those who are across seas, those who may be watching from another country, those who, thought it being a good thing to look in on Ace today. I appreciate it. Appreciate all those who subscribe to Ace's Corner Talk. Much love to you. Big ups to my man who ain't in action right now, but he's in action doing his thing. Logic, what's up? Peace to you, G. All right, so look, Ace gonna get busy tonight. I'm not gonna hold nobody long, but did have something on my chest I did wanted to share or talk about. So hopefully you'll lend me your ear. Ace is in a hole. I want to see y'all active so I can go somewhere with this dialogue. Don't want to be talking to myself. So hopefully those who are watching will be active. Today I want to talk about ego and an alter ego. We'll give you a couple of definitions and go in with some things that was on my mind as I laid down earlier. So check this out. So ego. Your ego is your conscious mind, the part of your identity that you consider yourself. If you say someone has a big ego, then you are describing themselves. Self-esteem, self-importance, self-worth, self-respect, self-image, self-confidence. All of that describes the ego. Alter ego is a second self which is believed to be distinct from a person. Normal or original personality. A person who has an alter ego is said to lead a double life. I want to bring up just to give you an idea of what the alter ego is, and also to be Clark Kent at the same time, but to simply say a lot of us have alter egos and don't even realize it. When describing the ego, self-esteem, self-importance, self-worth, self-respect, self-image, self-confidence. All of that should describe who we are as individuals. What I just read off should describe us. It should describe to a certain extent our ego. Some people possess bigger egos than others. Some people are humble and don't display any type of an ego. But when we talk about the ego, I want to associate it with my race being black. I wanted to say when we, well, let me bring it back. I want to go back real quick. Let's go back in the 60s. Let's go back to the early 70s and the 80s when Black and Proud was the narrative being pushed. When somebody said I'm black and I'm proud, that stood for something. That had a whole lot of meaning behind it. People pumping their fists in the air with the afros, with the pick in the afros. All of that was something that people revered as being proud. That ego of being black really meant something back in the early 60s to the 70s and the early 80s. And it seems like now when black isn't good enough, we had to look to our secondary nature, which would be our alter ego. When being proud of who we are as a race, being conscious, no longer had the effect like it used to in the early 60s and 70s and 80s. It seems like now we had to fall back on the alter ego, which today is now being pushed. That is the narrative we see out here in these streets today, is the alter ego. When it was the ego back in the 60s and 70s and 80s being pushed, where our self-esteem was high, our self-importance was high, our self-worth was high, our self-respect was high, our self-image was important and at its all high. Self-confidence was at its all-time high. And it seems like now we fast forwarded to 2017, where the conscious movement, people talking about being conscious, being aware of thyself, knowing thyself, has not taken the same effect that it did back in the early 60s and 70s. So now, if it had not taken the effect to the newer generation, the only conclusion that I can come up with to describe the mindset in the movement of the people in today's generation would be only to say that it's the alter ego that's driving the people today. And like I said, the alter ego is the second self, which is believed to be distant from a person's normal or original personality. Meaning, who you should be and who you portray to be, that's not what you are. Because now we look at the alter ego as being the person you portray rather than the ego. Because although the ego has its qualities, at this particular time, in order to feel like people of my color, people of my nationality, in order for us to feel like we matter or to feel like we're surviving in today's world, we have to now put on the alter ego. And as much as I hate to say it, as much as I hate to bring this up, we have to open our eyes to this very important narrative that's being painted. We can't blame black. We can't blame white. We can't blame Chinese, Russian, or Indian, or any other nationality when it comes to looking at ourselves, when it comes to looking at where we are as a people. I think the only thing in conclusion we really can come up with is that the alter ego somehow or another took course or took its place in our life. When we begin to talk about how we as a people are surviving, I think we're only surviving off of the premise that we've took the nature of the alter ego rather than strengthening our ego as human beings. Having an ego is not a bad thing, because all that means is that you have self-esteem about yourself. See, people paint the narrative that you having an ego is something bad. Having an alter ego, on the other hand, can be looked at as something negative. Because if you look at it from another pair of lens, you can say that person is a cocky person. You can say that person is fronting or putting on. You can say that the individual that is supposed to be in his ego has now took on the form of an alter ego to alter who he or she is in order to feel good about him or herself. And as I look back today over my life, I can remember when the times when my alter ego had pushed itself to the forefront to try to take control of my ego. It was like the good versus the bad. The bad angel on one side and the evil angel on the other side. Every time that I would do something that was good, the alter ego would come to the forefront to push the narrative of doing something versus the ego. And I believe the state of where we are today as a generation, as a people, we are now seeing the alter egos of individuals coming forward instead of their ego. Because of where they are mentally, because of where they are in their mental capacity, instead of having self-esteem, instead of having any self-importance, or feeling like they're worth anything, feeling like they have self-respect for themselves and others, trying to have a self-image and self-confidence. Now that I look back over everything that's being painted right now, over the news, over social medias, over the internet, now I see people possessing the alter ego. If we stand up as a people and say, I'm proud to be who I am in this very skin, I'm proud to be the individual that has been laid in this skin, I can look back to my own self and say, I'm proud to be who I am and who God made me. And every time that alter ego of mine wants to rise up in me, I have to check it. I have to talk to it. I have to speak to it. Because the alter ego should not have a place in the individual, because it consumes you. See, that's the difference between the ego and the alter ego. The alter ego wants to take control of you. And then you're no longer possessing the ego. You're no longer being the individual you should be or living up to your full potential. Now you're taking over by a character of an alter ego. Whatever your mind imagined you should be or could be, you're reaching for that in your alter ego. It's that other half of you that subscribes to anything and everything that is contrary to who you should be or could be. The alter ego is that thing where every time you set forward to do a good agenda, the alter ego pushes a negative agenda and then some. I remember I watched a clip one day where Beyonce was talking about her alter ego, which would have been Sasha Fierce. She started to talk about how every time she got on stage, she felt something taking control of her. And she turned into Sasha Fierce, which would represent or which would describe the alter ego. In order for her to perform, she could not do it as herself, the individual Beyonce. She had to do it as the alter ego, which would be Sasha Fierce. Aces in a hole, where y'all at? Let me see some chat going on or something. Peace to everybody out there watching. What's good with you? Let's see what's up. Y'all live out there? I know it's a little late. Let's see what's popping. Y'all live? So the alter ego. That alter ego can represent the other half of you that in some shape, form, or fashion is linked up to the lower self, but has power. I want to paint that and get that over to you. See, the alter ego has its individual power. See, the ego you got to work on. See, the ego you have to build up. The ego you got to work on the self-esteem, the self-importance, the self-worth, self-respect. All of that you have to work on. It's like a constant working in you. See, all of that you got to work on when it comes to the alter ego. Peace, what's good, fams? The alter ego is something you got to constantly work on. But then when you look at the flip side of it, the ego possesses a certain strength where not only does it come with its own agenda, not only does it come with its own narrative, but it also is a certain part of you that comes forward and takes control. Even the times where you try to control it, it gets out of control. That's that alter ego working in you. When people said being black wasn't good enough, by default, they had to choose the alter ego. Listen to what I said. When being black wasn't cool in a lot of people's eyes, what they had to do was resort to the alter ego. They had to fall back on the alter ego. Because when it wasn't cool to possess the skin you walking in, or when it wasn't cool to be who you are as a natural melanated person, your alter ego had to kick in to paint you as something that you're really not. It's crazy when I look at it today. In order for us to be accepted, we have to resort to the alter ego. Some people may call it being a coon. I hear that word used a whole lot. I hear people talking about being a coon. That word coon is thrown so loosely. But what I think another way of describing that word would be the alter ego. It would be that the individual that is being called the coon does not like the skin that they're in. So in order to appease another individual or another group of individuals, they have to do a certain thing which would be classified as cooning. So they take on the alter ego of a coon. Hate using that word, but I'm trying to go somewhere with it. Now, when being cool and being a rapper and being in the limelight is such a strong narrative in today's society, it's such a strong state of mind, it's such a strong personality that people will do anything to possess that ego or that alter ego. They will do anything, right down to trying drugs, right down to indulging in activities that normally in the ego or in a state where the ego should be operating. Now they're reaching for the alter ego to give them more confidence to indulge in that particular behavior or indulging in the switching of their characters. So what happens is they have to reach and pull for the alter ego when they feel and know they ain't doing enough or feeling proud enough for who they are and the achievements they are striving for. So I see people reaching for the alter ego. I see people reaching and striving to change who they are to be something else in order to have self-respect, in order to build their self-esteem, which is the ego, in order to have confidence, that is the ego. So instead of working on their ego, which takes time, which takes practice, which takes a lot of concentration, which takes a lot of endurance, which takes a lot of focus, to do all of that, to possess that ego, you have to constantly work on it, which is a process. But people today, we feel like it takes a little too long for us to work on the ego, so they start reaching and summoning the alter ego so they can arrive or get to a place within themselves at a faster pace. And as crazy as it seems, that's what I see today. When I hear people talk about their conscious, it always has to be associated with material things in order to prove or state how conscious they really are. Back in the day, when conscious was brought out, you usually see a brother with a muumuu on, a kufi. That was how it was represented to be conscious. You really didn't have a whole lot of extravagant things when it came to being conscious. You just represented the consciousness with the knowledge. But as we fast forward today, if you look at today's society, when we talk about consciousness, even on this YouTube, bringing the perspective of consciousness, you see a lot of people wanting to flash more material things than anything. And then what they do is to justify them being conscious or justify the work that they're doing. They'll say, well, these are the things I need to show you that I'm doing well. So follow me because I got material things. But I beg to differ. I think that's more of the alter ego rather than the ego. Because when you're confident in what you're doing and you believe that you're helping individuals, you don't really need to show off your monetary, or you don't need to show off a whole lot of material things to prove whether you are able to lend a hand or whether you're able to help individuals. I think more or less that's just proving that you're working in the alter ego stage rather than your ego. Because you have more self-respect when you're operating in your ego stage. You have self-respect. So when it comes to who you are, you're comfortable with that. You don't need to do a whole lot to prove who you are. being who you are is just enough, and people will accept you because your ego is not in an altered state. That's why it's a alter ego, meaning it has been altered from who you originally should be or who you originally are. Alter ego, altering who you are, trying to be somebody that you're not. And then what happens is when you look at individuals, when you look at people, you'll see that you know from on the inside by the vibes they give off that they're operating in the alter ego stage. When deep down inside, when you're looking at them, they should be operating in the ego stage. You're seeing the lack of self-respect for themselves by what they say and what they do. You see the self-worth not there. The self-esteem not there. Because they begin to play childish games with life, with people. They begin to get loosely with how they intertwine with you and other people. So that leads me to believe that they're not operating in the ego stage. They're operating in the alter ego. Because once the alter ego has taken control, you no longer are aware of the actions that you display. Because there's something else that is in control. Meaning the alter ego. When you should be working on the ego, working on where you are in life, working on building who you are in life, the alter ego has taken control and now has possessed or taken control of you. The alter ego don't know when to shut up. The alter ego doesn't know how to listen. The alter ego does not understand when it's in error because it's already at its max capacity, meaning there's nothing you can tell the alter ego because it had to transform to that stage in order to validate who it is. The alter ego itself had to morph to what it is because it was not comfortable being the ego, being the individual who God made you. Instead of us working on who God made us, strengthening who we are as a people, as an individual, getting knowledge about how to correct the rights and wrongs in your life, you have subscribed to pulling on the alter ego so that you can escape where you are in life and escape how your life and the cards that have been dealt in your life are. Knowing that life is not an easy thing to maneuver through, knowing that life has its challenges and ups and downs. Instead of us learning how to work through the bittersweet of life experiences, we tend to pull on the alter ego more than anything. Those who are watching, hit that like button. I'm surprised I don't see nobody in my chat room yet. If you're watching, I ask that you at least acknowledge the chat room, Aces in the Hole. I at least acknowledge that that you're in agreements. I want to see what's popping in the chat. I want to see who's watching. At least so I can get an idea of who I'm talking to. Not that this pertains to you, but if you are listening, it would be good to know that you are in the building in Aces in the Hole, so I can at least shout you out for being a part of Aces Corner Talk today. So at least just put what's up so I can acknowledge your presence today. The alter ego. The alter ego suppresses the ego that is crying out. See, the ego is crying out for help. It's crying out to be acknowledged. It's crying out It's crying out so that whoever and anybody that's around a person that is trying to work on the ego, it's crying out to get its notoriety. But when there's no one to feed the ego, then the individual will result to the taking over by the alter ego. And it is crazy as it seems, and it is crazy as it is, the alter ego has no place in this world. It's like a man with no home, man with no shelter. It has no residency. So it chooses to take residency in an individual that is confused or that has not made up their mind about where they are in life. Usually when you see the alter ego operating in the individual, it seems like they're lost and do not know what direction they need to go in. So the only thing they could do was pull on the alter ego. Like I said before, the ego is that part of you that needs to be worked on. It's not an overnight success. It's not something that you can do in a 2 or 3 minute span. The alter ego has to be worked on. It has to be tried. Has to be refurnished. That alter ego of ours, on the other hand, tries to get it overnight. It tries to be a one-hit wonder, an overnight success. It tries to bypass the making and the breaking of who you should be. That's why when you're operating on the stage or the level playing field of your ego, you learn to appreciate you as the individual. You will appreciate and love yourself more. But when you are trying to get somewhere fast without going through the process of being made, the alter ego kicks in. So there's a lack of appreciation for who you are and who you should be. Most of the time I see the alter ego in work, that's the very time I see where people deny God. When the alter ego is working in the individual, that's the time when I see God being denounced. Because God will help you work on your ego. God will help you work on you as the individual, refurnishing and refurnishing who you are to make you a better person. Not a perfect person, but a better person than who you are. Not by society's standards, but by God's standards. And I know that's a hard pill to swallow. I know that is something that people don't like to hear. But there should be a standard set in your life, whatever that standard may be. I can't tell you what the standard is or should be, but what I can say, it should be at least a decent standard, whatever decent is to you. But now we find the alter ego working and trying to take control, thus causing a shipwreck in people's lives. The alter ego does not know how to slow down when it's time to slow down. The alter ego does not know how to stay in its lane. So what happens is it drives out of control. The alter ego doesn't know how to listen and respond when asked to respond. It's crazy all over the place. And as I stand here today, anytime that I felt like the direction my life was going, I had to evaluate whether the ego or the alter ego was heading me in the direction. I couldn't play the game with myself of rather my ego was at stake or whether my alter ego was the one pushing the narrative. Every time my alter ego worked on me, I found myself getting locked up and going to jail. Every time I felt my alter ego was working in me, I had to go get a Newport. I had to go get a Black a Mile. I had to lace up a weed. I had to do something other than being who I was, because the alter ego was desiring the energy, was desiring to pull on my inner man. Come on, I know some people been right in these shoes that I'm talking about. When you wanted to stay home and chill, the alter ego was telling you that you needed to be out somewhere, doing something, clubbing, partying. When you felt like you wanted to take a break from life and everything that you was involved in because of the stress and pressure, the alter ego told you to take the easy way out. The alter ego doesn't know how to rationalize the behaviors that we indulge in our life. The alter ego doesn't know how to differ between the good and the bad. It just indulges in every single thing. When your ego is working in you, your ego at least has the consciousness or the conscious state where you will rationalize whether you should or shouldn't do something. Anytime our alter ego starts to work in us, it puts us in a mental place. It puts us in an uneased situation in our mind and heart. The alter ego does not know when and where to get off the train. So it stays on for every stop, every ride that it takes. The ego, which is the self, which is that part of you that rationalizes the good and the bad, but chooses to do the good. The ego is the thing in you that chooses to respect other people, chooses to respect who he or she is. I know oftentimes when I look at my situation, look at my family, I have to see and ask myself, what is operating in my household? Is it a dominant ego? Or is it the alter ego? When I look at my family, my wife, my kids, what's up, The Darkness Awakens? There we go. Aces in the hole. What's good, everybody? At least we got somebody in there. I had to make sure my chat was working because I did a little work to it earlier. I kind of thought there was something wrong with it. So, peace to you. What's good, family? So I had to think about what was operating in my family, in my household. Am I the type of person that rules with an iron fist, the alter ego, to say what I say goes, what I do goes, I'm the last word? Or will I allow my ego to help balance who I am and ask if this should be the way I go, or this a good idea to do this or that? That alter ego that arises in a moment of weakness, it arises in a moment of the decision making. The alter ego arises in an individual that has not made up their mind about who they are and about what they should be. A lot of times I see how the alter ego portrays an individual in a light that most people can say that's not who he or she really is. I can't walk around today trying to portray or be something I'm not. So all I can be is me. I had to pay close attention to make sure that my alter ego is not trying to arise in how I deal with situations in my life, how I deal with individuals, and how I respond to individuals, whether it's negative or positive. So what I do as me, Ace, I have to pick the battles that I'm engaging in, whether it's to fight or not. Because if my ego's not ready to fight a battle, I have to work on myself until I get to the point where I'm able and ready to face them battles head first, head on. But it's a work in process, people, because every time a battle arises, the ego wants to take control, to prove the manhood. It wants to prove that you're able to get one up on somebody. The alter ego wants to prove and show and prove who you really are. That you the mean green on the streets. Wants to prove that you the new kid on the block. So the alter ego takes control of you. As I look at the current situations in the state of my own city that I live in, a lot of what I'm seeing is the alter ego in a lot of the individuals that are committing crimes. The alter ego is working out here in these streets in our babies and our young adults, because they're not willing and ready to go through the necessary steps of working on their ego, which takes a little time because it's a trial and error period. The ego has to be birthed. It has to be matured and cultured and made to what it is, to who you are, because it's the first part of you. The alter ego is the second personality of who you are.